Hello. A whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Julian have roles also with a Mark Violet and a Ray Collo with social media with the FBI and with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and a whole bunch of people tied to his co-defendants, a Thaddeus Grabowski, a Dominic Lapriata, and a John LeConte, and their family members and neighbors have been roles of predicate acts against me at each of the campuses I went to, also with names next to them. And they also recorded themselves into branch using words like immature, immaturity, adult, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. As a Joshua Julian's further involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, as is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He's going to pretend other, but that's recorded. I don't know him. I never partied with him, as he said on Facebook. There, he's trying to pretend other, also with a Daryl Chandler, trying to take a picture of me holding a cup that a Ray Collo told me to hold. A Daryl Chandler has roles with a Ray Collo and a Joe DeMoro, with people from Korea, also with people from Korea that Mark Violet has roles with them with wire crimes with O'Brien families, police families, intercities, with a whole bunch of different police departments with the same house slash S involved with retired Weathersfield police chiefs and their intimate ties, involved with wire crimes with it increasingly, and people that planted evidence on all sides of my house. When I caught them with the principal obscure nature, I caught them with worse natures of organized crimes rules with him, and people involved with timed intercities connected murders, body dumping spots uses, names next to it, collusion slash S. And they brought this up too. Now, how a whole bunch of people are brought up by the interbranch when they involve themselves with crime scenes as fake punks, as collusion slash S, originally and still. That's one of the things witch trials about. That's one of the, even if they're made up. That's why the witch trials place is right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, with narratives and natures of criminal and citizen's natures of positive treatments and negative treatments as collusion slash S to keep the identity of the breaching method and its identity of relativity slash hyper relativities, plural, to ourselves from being discerned, even though that's one of the things that nature demonstrates as a proper answer to questions that both natures and our founders asked us to ask ourselves. Asking us telling us to get the Constitution unabridged and valued, why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them, and why and how we have to address how the corrections offices and the judicial branch offices and the names at the prisons and their campuses have been collusions with all natures of crime scenes, including body dumping spots, and keeping their and roles, keeping their killers' mouth shut. They have rules to understand how they have evil to be motivated for such. You have to understand how they have predicate acts with facts, methods, collusion slash S at each campus they went to. Otherwise, that body was sentenced. In other words, and this makes the names of the people of the sciences, including the science of incarceration or what they call corrections, while they are still criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. They're not legitimately with the Mike Violet, with the KKK, black themed, Latino themed, and speaking about and why they confess those things to me, and where and how and why. With my neighbors and everyone attaching, I never had a class with Mark Violet or Justin Klavinskis. I never saw them on campuses. When I walked by, they tried to make a fake exception by timing where I was going to walk by, unusually. In other words, because they have roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, interstates and internationally. They have roles with Central Connecticut State University at New Britain, Connecticut, intelligence and names next to them with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. That's in New Britain, Connecticut. They have roles with federal evidences, crimes with names, investigators tied to the sides of it through time as their roles with names at next to Hartford Hospital, which is a campus. Hospitals are campuses. Now they have used roles with mental health as a phrase used criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought by the identities of the sciences. And that's important because then they also have simultaneously where this is relative. They have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought natures of calmness, and natures of aggression roles, and with the interbranch refusing to identify themselves legitimately. Interbranch each year increasingly since I was a kid. And they've been doing this intercities and intracities, intercampuses and intercampuses. The Board of Education has roles with various natures of organized crimes here, and the differences of it worse there or at the names next to their location /S, and the differences of guilt, because that's used to hide the breaching method, which is increasingly uses of suits and ties counters exceptions since semi-ancient times, relative to where and to how. Also, evidence and revelations come from paying attention to evidence how we have black people's whites of eyes and nature communicating with things about how and why. Species volumes, distinct species volumes, have things about themselves, not also non-distinct and simultaneous, but also further hypersimultaneous. That which is neither them nor us, but it is all things anyway. Therefore, us and them. That's why all the different species have quality aspects in nature: distinct, non-distinct, simultaneous. Again, / hypersimultaneous. And we can discern this. But offensively, there are theories that the names of the people the sciences have. And there is syntax tied to that, used dishonestly. The names of the people of the sciences are being and have been used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions raw, to prevent discernment of how nature is communicating to us that there is a natural law. Again, we have black people's whites of eye, and we have that having been left out. And where and how we could discern that having been left out through experience, actual life experience. Not towards and through a resume. Also, the interbranch family members lie about what they think in the businesses, and even though they don't realize to an extent too, because even when they're using the truth, that's what people do. The way the breaching method knew they would use truths for lies. They use truths to screen motivations. In other words, and increasingly, they have real motivations because the breaching method propagated and maintains that self-value by the styles, logics, needs, and natures in the way of us, A through Z, but as A through Z. In other words, we have black people's whites of eyes. It means to discern that there is a torture method, extortion method, fact, cheating nature, slavery, therefore physically, upon all locations /S, everywhere the human species body is, let alone those places most impacted by it. That's why the murder rates are there. Oh, but let's do studies. Those research locations are recorded, used, being and haven't been used remotely, criminally, foreign influence. They act to have filmed, to have cameras film things, and people pretending passions and emotions to pretend they know people. Kevin Harris has roles with people I don't even know the name of, increasingly tied to at corners of buildings and corners of streets, putting predicate acts with facts roles, and violence with other countries, overt criminal enterprises, and interbranch refusing to identify themselves legitimately. Increasingly, people with Harvard Hospital's Institute of Living on the campus of Harvard Hospital, founded in 1822, with slavery entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies, and collusion /S with other communicated for what our founders communicated for us to understand about the northern and southern colonies' roles of slavery, and the breaching method that had roles with it entrenched. And otherwise, it would sense that body trying to counter syntactically, therefore physically, including if they're a majority of people, including if they're everybody. That's why it's important to understand that, and how there were more than 13 colonies, and even they were divided. And they were individual, internationally monitored conversations and natures of negotiations and diplomacy that were used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, incapable of their members, incapable of, defending their logic and of affording to be, let alone to protract, freedom of speech with short words, with convictions proper. Black peoples, we don't leave out how there's a predicate acts with facts method, clearer than day here. Predicate acts, See, these people learn from each other, and they hear the extra. Well, it's a predicate. We're going to learn that it's a predicate act is a phrase where law is nature is showing us that we could discern hyper invisible but still discernible criminal insidiousness nature distinctly from invisible but still discernible criminal insidiousness nature, and that and their difference go together. Where and how we could discern that being and having been used remotely self-valued through self-valued roles with it and styles, needs, and natures with that. Otherwise, they are sensing for the breaching method. In other words, when they bring up the words like jobs, it is measured and maintained that not one identity that can deal with reality properly. Because you don't bring up jobs when you know that every rap video has people stacked upon in that tactically denatured below their feet. Go have the little kids walk to school. How long does it take to get to the bottom of that building? The ones in the rap videos in the background. That's why you have all the anger in it. And we have criminal and ceaseless natures of peace. Otherwise, they are sensing, because they too are roles, keeping other things, others, ourselves blamed. And they're denying and screening the breaching method right there, the predicate acts with facts method, concentrated on New York City. For example, sickly distinctly from the suburbs designed before America's founders were born, designed for torture, extortion, slavery, clearer than day. The only reason it's not clearer than day, the sciences have takes on history, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, on the principles of reason, on the value of if people know about what they think is value or not. People don't know about James Madison's plan, why they had to counter the other and force the other founders to be, including the Native American ones, because they are founders too, and the rest of the founders. And that's distinct from the other presidents. George Washington agreed to help them and to use James Madison's plan. We're also supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, because no one had free speech, and everyone's free speech was measured an extent of collusion/s against everyone else. Otherwise, that body would be censored, and that would be accounted for, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was everyone. I shouldn't have to keep repeating this thing, because these are things that people were obligated to know, that the sciences names were obligated to know, but they have narratives by their campuses, no. How they are trained to do their experts, dishonest. They can't afford but to self-value into branch, forging and switching names with them. And subject treatments have been used, faking exceptions and using exception nature, tactical terror, how nature is showing us to appreciate exception nature, and a special difference, not special difference, special difference, no. Earth has a special difference, and we could ignore the system that that is the identity of all space/existence. Relative to that, manifest a special difference, but it would just forces our difference from here. That's why how the ocean is polluted. That's why how there are extinctions, which is distinct from forced space nature transfer, which is distinct from as Leith of Hadith, more probably having been a scientific phrase. Leith of Hadith, the river, the force. In other words, where they call it things through history, they're measured, maintained, need to blame other things, others, than not being able to speak about things. There's a breaching method involved. Its forced space nature transfer is more probably demonstrably how the ancient pantheism that was being led by the singular, the hyper singular identity of all space/existence as a scientific value, we simultaneously are and are not supposed to agree about. Nature shows us that too. And relative to the subject treatments, individually grouped and simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, we're not supposed to leave out the smallest finite detail, let alone one like where and how a breaching method had roles with itself entrenched right through foundings. And people speak about, and people use the word hegemony, pretending they don't realize that the economies are with locations areas in the states. They have opinions regarding economies and being polled. The polling locations are used criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Whole bunch of investigators used remotely with people planting evidences there with a tied to a Brian Silver and a Brendan Leahy, involved with a Fred Guzet, a Rick Cianfaglione, and a Kevin Harris. Also with medical and sexual offenders of kids, with prosecutors and judges who have been planting various natures of federal evidences, crime methods, predicate acts methods, with names at next to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with their roles with names on my street through time, and with a whole bunch of people I don't even know the names of, increasingly planting evidence on all sides of my house's roles with them. Like a Fred Grisey, a stranger sought me out to make these confessions in my area and to record things that they hid because they were pretending other was recorded already in all sides of criminal and civil cases as collusion/S with all natures of crime scenes. And years apart, untimely deaths had connections to ones that were intercity, multiple connected, and then time collusions with those different ones at the same house/S that had insidious uses of them and of the previous owners and people that broke into it. And there are proof that they might have killed the last owner of it through a foreign, hyper-foreign might have had her killed. And right through the people involved with the various courts, personally with the family members, with foreign and domestic medical families, also with badges and security at Hartford Hospital and Institute of Living, and their roles with the Mayan house next to there, and with a DeMorro's Market building that used to be there for years, and with their where they are now too, and where they used to be, and with the IL's kitchen. I don't know if they're still there near Buckley High School, which is not far from Harvard Hospital's campus too. These are also names that tied to them, next to the campus's intercities, tied to them, and increasingly roles with relative predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, also faked for them. This is also why the interbranch switch and forge names, while the news at the same time steals people's identities with a whole bunch of other countries and overt criminal enterprises and murders and names next to body dumping spots. As time collusion/S within as names that attached me to fake conversations and being at the police station when I was a kid, and then as an adult too. And increasingly, the kids and the adults of family members have time collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And they all kinds of standing roles with all kinds of natures of, things they're pretending to be against. They're involved with those things and way worse. Some ways, the worst ways. In other words, they value. Even when you're shocking off, certain type of victim/hyper victim needs to respond to what you discern in the background of rap videos. That is unacceptable. That doesn't mean we have to agree with the speaker of the rap video. If they told the truth, they wouldn't have left out how we have black people as whites of eyes. In other words, they're keeping their roles too, keeping other things, all this, the names of the sciences, the names of the people of the sciences are forced to blame other things, others ourselves, or to be sensed, including if as a majority of people, including if as everyone, including if as any grouping of countries that entertains locations, areas, and states syntax as manifest in use /as of it. They never stop, I've seen.